Imagine finding a creature so unusual, so captivating that you feel compelled to bring it home. That's exactly what happened. But this fish held a secret, a dark energy that began to unravel her life in ways no one could foresee. Prepare yourself, because this heartwarming rescue takes a chilling turn you simply have to see to believe. The wind howled fiercely against the coastal cliffs, carrying with it the briny scent of the ocean. Dark clouds loomed overhead, blotting out the sun, casting the beach into an eerie twilight. The tide pulled restlessly against the shore, sending waves crashing violently over the rocks. Sarah, wrapped in her long coat, wandered along the beach, her footsteps leaving deep imprints in the wet sand. It had been a difficult week for her, moving into a new town by the coast, away from the hustle and bustle of the city life she had once known. The days here felt slower, more deliberate, and the peace of the environment was both a welcome relief and a constant reminder of her inner struggles. She often found herself walking along the shoreline, trying to make sense of her emotions and the new life she was building. It was during one of these solitary walks that she spotted something unusual near the water's edge. It wasn't the typical detritus one might find on a beach, the broken shells or driftwood scattered across the sand. No, this was different. A strange, shimmering creature that seemed almost otherworldly. At first, Sarah thought it was just a piece of seaweed tangled with some debris, but as she got closer, she could see the distinct outline of a fish, its scales flickering with an iridescent glow. It looked far too beautiful and out of place on the jagged beach. Its silvery body shimmered as though reflecting the very essence of the storm, and its large, dark eyes stared vacantly at the horizon. The creature was struggling to move, its fins twitching weakly, and it was clear that it was in distress. For a moment, Sarah stood frozen, unsure of what to do. She could leave it there, let nature take its course, or she could try to help it, though she didn't know if it would survive the cold, harsh conditions. She hesitated, her heart torn between rationality and empathy, but in the end, her compassion won out. She couldn't just leave it there to die. Gently, she lowered herself to the sand and scooped the creature up, feeling its slick, cold body against her palms. It was heavier than she expected, and there was something unsettling about the way it didn't resist, as though it had surrendered to her touch. She cradled it carefully, her thoughts swirling with confusion and worry. What kind of fish was this? It seemed like no fish she had ever encountered. With the storm still whipping around her, Sarah decided she had to take it home. She rushed back to her car, clutching the creature in her arms, unsure if it would even survive the ride. The drive back to her cottage was a blur. The weather was growing worse by the minute, but she didn't dare let the fish out of her sight. She knew she had to do something. She couldn't just abandon it. Once she arrived home, Sarah quickly set up a makeshift aquarium in the corner of her living room, a small glass tank that had been gathering dust since her last attempt at keeping a pet fish years ago. She filled it with water and gently placed the shimmering creature inside, watching as it floated listlessly in the tank. It didn't move much, just a subtle twitch now and then, as though it was too exhausted to respond to its new environment. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had done something important by rescuing it, that she had saved it from something far worse than the beach. And in some strange way, the creature seemed to acknowledge her, as though it knew she was its savior. But she couldn't help but wonder what she had brought into her home. The fish was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Its iridescent scales caught the light in an almost magical way, and its eyes gleamed with an unnatural intensity. She made a vow to care for it, to make sure it recovered from whatever ordeal it had gone through. The more she observed the fish, the more a strange connection formed between them, as if the creature was trying to communicate with her, its eyes always following her every movement. The peace Sarah had hoped to find in rescuing the fish was soon replaced with a gnawing sense of unease, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. Days passed and Sarah's concern for the fish grew. It seemed to recover slowly, but something was definitely off. The fish didn't eat the food she provided, flakes, pellets, even the live worms she tried. It just swam in circles, its eyes watching her intently. The longer she observed it, the more she began to feel that the creature was aware of her in a way that no ordinary fish should be. Its eyes, dark and reflective, would follow her movements around the room, unblinking and unrelenting. But it wasn't just the fish that made Sarah uneasy. There were small, unexplainable things happening around the house. It started with the temperature. Despite the summer heat outside, her living room always felt cold when she entered. a sharp chill in the air that seemed to come from nowhere. It wasn't the kind of cold that made you shiver, but rather the kind that settled deep in your bones, a discomforting chill that stayed with you long after you left the room. At first, Sarah attributed it to the old house and its strange quirks, but as the days went on, the chill persisted, always present, even in the hottest of months. Then came the scratching sounds. At night, when Sarah lay in bed, she would hear faint noises from the walls. It sounded like claws scraping against the wood, or perhaps someone trying to get through. She would lie there, heart pounding, trying to convince herself that it was just the house settling, the wind creaking through the cracks. But the sounds were too deliberate, too consistent, and when she checked the next morning, there was no sign of anything amiss. Sarah was growing paranoid. She told herself it was the stress of the move, the isolation of living alone, the pressure of a new job. But deep down, she knew that something was wrong. The fish's strange behavior only intensified the sense of unease. It had started growing, rapidly. At first it was subtle, but now it was noticeable. The once small, slender fish was elongating, its body stretching further than it should have. Its fins were no longer delicate and translucent, but growing larger, more defined, with a sharpness that seemed almost predatory. And its eyes, they seemed to be growing larger too, their silvery gleam deepening as though they were becoming more perceptive, more intelligent. Sarah tried to rationalize everything. She told herself it was just a freak of nature, some rare species that behaved in strange ways. But even as she said the words to herself, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The house, once comforting and cozy, now felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, seemed to carry with it a growing sense of dread. It wasn't just the fish anymore, it was everything around her. She couldn't escape it. The fish wasn't just a pet. It had become something more, something that seemed to be connected to her in a way she couldn't understand. There was no going back now. The events were spiraling beyond her control. The changes in the fish weren't just physical anymore. It had begun to exhibit behaviors that defied logic and science. Sarah noticed that it responded to her voice. When she spoke to it, the fish would tilt its head in what seemed like acknowledgement. It wasn't just a random movement. It was deliberate, almost as if it understood her words. The first time it happened, Sarah laughed nervously, convinced it was a coincidence, but as the days passed, the fish's behavior became more pronounced. It would turn toward her when she entered the room, its eyes fixed on her, as if waiting for her to speak. At times, Sarah would find herself talking to the fish, telling it about her day, her hopes, her fears. And each time it would seem to listen, its unblinking gaze following her with a depth that unsettled her. But it wasn't just the fish's behavior that was changing. Its physical form continued to evolve in ways that were impossible to ignore. Its body grew longer, more serpentine, its scales shimmering with a deeper, more unsettling glow. But the most disturbing change came with its mouth. It started to open wider than any fish's mouth should have been able to. As Sarah watched in horror, she saw that the fish's teeth, if they could be called that, began to protrude, sharp and jagged, like something that belonged to a predator, not a creature that lived in the sea. She tried to ignore the changes, telling herself it was just a freak of nature, some rare mutation that she had no experience with. But deep down, she knew that it was something more than that. The creature was no longer just a fish. It had become something else, something that she couldn't control. And the more she tried to distance herself from it, the more it seemed to grow stronger. She began to feel isolated, as though the fish was drawing her into its strange world. Her friends stopped calling, her family's visits grew less frequent, and the walls of her home seemed to close in on her. The more she focused on the fish, the more she pushed others away. It was as though the creature had taken control of her life, and she was helpless to stop it. The unease continued to grow, but Sarah couldn't escape. She was too drawn to the fish, too trapped in its strange, hypnotic pull. It was one fateful night, as Sarah was attempting to go to sleep, that the truth finally revealed itself. A power outage struck the town, plunging the house into darkness. Sarah fumbled for a flashlight, her heart racing with the growing sense of dread that had been building for days. As the flashlight's beam flickered to life, she turned it toward the fish's tank, expecting to see the usual iridescent shimmer of its scales. But what she saw instead made her blood run cold. The fish, if it could even be called that anymore, was glowing. Its body, once shimmering with hues of blue and green, now radiated a sickly, unearthly light. The scales had deepened, turning a haunting shade of purple, and its once delicate fins were now sharp, jagged like blades. But it wasn't just its appearance that terrified Sarah, it was its eyes. The fish's gaze had shifted, no longer the innocent, silvery reflection it had once been. Instead, they were now glowing with a cold, malevolent light, fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel as though it was looking straight into her soul. As Sarah stood frozen in fear, the fish opened its mouth wider than before, revealing teeth that no fish should possess. Razor-sharp, jagged teeth that seemed to stretch unnaturally, too many for the fish's small jaw. It was then that she realized the terrible truth. The fish was no longer just a creature from the sea. It was something ancient, something far more dangerous. It had never been a simple animal. Whatever it was, it had been waiting for someone like her to rescue it, to bring it into the world again. The realization hit her like a slap across the face. The creature was malevolent, and her act of kindness had only brought it closer to its true purpose. Desperately, Sarah reached for a nearby hammer, her hands trembling as she lifted it above her head. With a final desperate cry, she swung it at the tank, smashing the glass. Water poured onto the floor as the creature let out a horrific screech, thrashing violently in the broken aquarium. Sarah stumbled back, her mind reeling with the horror of what she had done. The creature had been freed, and there was no going back now. It was too late. As the creature writhed in the water, its eyes fixed on her with an intense, malevolent glare, Sarah knew that she had made a terrible mistake. The fish was no longer a creature to be saved. It was something to be feared, and there was no escaping it. Her life would never be the same again. As Sarah's nightmare continues to unfold, one question lingers. What if, in your desire to help, you bring something into your world that was never meant to be? The line between kindness and danger is thinner than you think. The creature Sarah saved is still out there waiting. Will you be the next to make a decision that changes everything? Think carefully before you act, because sometimes the most innocent choices lead to the darkest consequences. Are you ready to face what lurks beneath? Thank you for watching us until the end. If you like this story and want us to create more similar content, please do support us by subscribing to this channel. Comment down and let me know what do you think of this story and where you are watching us from. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead.